The colony of the Alari was small and quiet, resting on the edge of a gentle star. Their world was covered in green fields, silver rivers, and villages made of shining crystal stone. The Alari people were known for their peaceful nature. They spent their days farming, singing, and studying the stars. They did not build weapons. They did not prepare for war. They believed the galaxy was wide enough for everyone to live in harmony. But one evening, their peace was broken. Without warning, dark ships entered the skies. They were the warships of the Vorn, a race feared across many systems. The Vorn were strong and ruthless. They believed in taking what they wanted and crushing those who could not resist. For them, strength was the only law. The Alari had no fleets, no soldiers, no defenses. They could only watch in fear as the Vorn ships spread across the sky like shadows. Beams of fire rained down, burning farms and homes. Crops that had taken years to grow turned to ash within minutes. The cries of families filled the air as they rushed to hide, but there was little safety to be found. The Alari leaders gathered in the council hall, their faces pale with fear. Elder Marin, one of the oldest among them, spoke with trembling words. "We cannot fight them. If we resist, they will destroy us completely. We must ask for help." "But who will hear us?" another elder asked. "The nearby worlds are afraid of the Vorn. None will risk their own safety for us." Silence fell across the council chamber. They knew the truth of those words. The galaxy was filled with many species, but few were willing to face the Vorn. To most, survival meant turning away from the suffering of others. The Alari were alone. Yet Elder Marin stood tall despite his age. "Alone we may be, but we must still try. If there is even one who listens, then hope remains." That night, the Alari prepared a message. It was short and simple, carrying their voice across the stars. The message spoke of the attack, the fires, and the danger. It did not ask for glory, nor did it promise reward. It was only a call for help, born from desperation and a will to survive. The signal was sent on all frequencies, spreading out into the darkness of space. It moved past dead moons, past glowing nebulae, and into the unknown. The Alari people watched their communication towers glow as the message carried their plea. Then, all they could do was wait. Days passed, and the situation grew worse. The Vorn had taken control of the main supply centers. They stole food, crystals, and anything of value. They left guards to patrol the villages, mocking the Alari and reminding them of their weakness. The once bright villages now stood under a shadow of fear. Every night, families gathered in silence, listening to the wind. Some whispered prayers that someone, anyone, would hear their cry. Others lost hope and believed no answer would come. Children asked their parents if help would arrive, and their parents struggled to find comforting words. On the third night, Elder Marin stood before his people in the great square. The flames of destroyed farms still burned in the distance, but his voice was calm. "We do not know if anyone will come," he said, "but we must believe in the strength of the stars. The universe is vast. Somewhere out there, hearts still beat for justice. We have sent our call. Now we must wait with faith." The people listened, and though fear still weighed heavy in their hearts, they found courage in his words. They knew their survival now depended on forces far beyond their own. In the silence of space, the signal continued its endless journey. Past abandoned stations, past forgotten routes, it moved faster than light, carrying the desperate voice of the Alari. Somewhere, it would reach listening ears. Somewhere, the fate of the Alari would be decided. And so, as the colony endured under the harsh rule of the Vorn, the call for aid lingered in the void. A fragile spark of hope glowed within the darkness, waiting to be answered. Across the galaxy, the Alari distress call did not vanish into silence. Signals travel faster than ships, and their cry for help spread through hidden corners of space. Traders, explorers, and listening posts picked it up. Some ignored it, fearing the name of the Vorn. Others whispered about it in secret, knowing that to speak of resistance against the Vorn could invite danger. In the markets of the neutral stations, the message was replayed in low voices. The image of the Alari leaders, weary and desperate, flickered on small screens. "Our homes burn, our children starve," the message said. "We ask for aid. We cannot fight alone." Most who watched felt pity, but also fear. Everyone knew the Vorn were merciless. To help the Alari meant to invite the Vorn's wrath. And so, station after station chose silence. Yet whispers began to spread. Whispers of a people who might answer. Humans. The stories of humans were uncertain and full of mystery. Many races had heard of them, but few had met them face to face. Some said humans were still young, a new species stepping onto the galactic stage. Others claimed they were ancient, their true strength hidden behind quiet expansion. In the taverns of space stations, pilots spoke of human warships that had been seen on the edges of known space. One trader swore he saw a single human cruiser chase off 3 raiders without firing more than a few shots. Another told of humans who refused bribes from smugglers, insisting on fairness in trade. A mercenary whispered that humans were unlike any species he had fought beside, for they carried an iron spirit that never broke, no matter the odds. Many dismissed these stories as exaggerations, but the rumors did not die. They grew stronger with every telling. For the Alari, these whispers reached their ears as faint sparks of hope. Within the occupied colony, quiet conversations spread between families. "Have you heard of the humans?" one would ask. "They say their ships are larger than cities." Another would answer, "They say humans do not run from battle. They fight for those who cannot." Some doubted these tales, thinking them nothing more than comforting myths. Yet others clung to them with fierce hope. For a people without weapons, belief in such stories was a shield against despair. Meanwhile, far from the colony, in the halls of other governments, the distress call was discussed in more careful tones. Ambassadors and leaders listened to the message and chose to look away. They spoke of balance, of not interfering, of how the Vorn were too powerful to challenge. "If the Alari fall, it is a tragedy," one counselor said, "but it is not our war." And so, one by one, the powers of the galaxy turned their eyes elsewhere. They calculated risk and gain, and in their calculations, the Alari were already lost. But humanity did not see the galaxy in the same way. On the frontier, where human colonies stretched across newly claimed worlds, the distress call arrived. It was decoded by listening posts and sent directly to the centers of command. There, human leaders studied it in silence. The message was clear. A peaceful people had been attacked, their lives hanging by a thread. The humans remembered their own history. They remembered a time when Earth itself had been broken by wars and invasions. They remembered what it was like to stand alone, praying for help that never came. That memory had shaped them, hardened them, and driven them to build ships of steel that could cross the stars. To the humans, the choice was simple. If no one else would answer the call, they would. Orders were given. Fleets were contacted. In the deep docks of human space, massive shapes began to stir. Human dreadnoughts, ships the size of mountains, built with weapons that could split moons, powered up their cores. Crews rushed aboard, training drills replaced with battle readiness. Engineers worked without pause, making sure every system burned with precision. News of this spread quickly, carried by human traders and explorers. Where other races hesitated, the humans acted. Soon, the whispers in the stations grew louder. "The humans have heard the call," someone said. "They are sending their ships." A shiver of awe moved through the galaxy. The stories might be true after all. Back on the Alari colony, word reached through secret channels that the humans had listened. The people gathered in small groups, sharing the news with cautious smiles. For the first time since the invasion, hope returned to their eyes. Elder Marin, standing among his people, spoke with steady voice. If the stories are true, then the stars themselves have answered us. Let us hold fast. Let us endure until they arrive. Above them, the Vorn continued their cruel patrols, unaware that storms were already gathering beyond their sight. Far away from the Alari colony, on the frontier of human space, the distress signal arrived in full clarity. In the command halls of Earth's fleet, officers gathered around glowing screens. The message repeated again and again, the voice of the Alari Council breaking with sorrow and fear. The room was quiet as the humans listened. Admiral Ryan, an older commander with sharp eyes, stood in silence. Around him, the younger officers shifted uneasily. They all knew the name of the Vorn. The Vorn were not pirates or raiders. They were conquerors who ruled through fear. To move against them was to risk open war. But Admiral Ryan did not see it as a question of risk. He saw the faces of the Alari children, their homes burning behind them. He remembered his own childhood history lessons about Earth, about how humans once begged for help during old wars and how no help came. That memory burned within him like a fire. "We answer," Admiral Ryan said at last. His voice carried the weight of certainty. "If the Vorn believe no one will stand against them, then they will learn what it means when humanity rises." The room filled with nods. There was no debate. Orders were sent through the fleet network. Across human space, ships that had been in quiet watch were called to arms. Deep in the shipyards, engineers who had been maintaining massive vessels now rushed to bring them alive. The dreadnoughts of humanity were not ordinary ships. They were floating fortresses, each larger than a city, carrying firepower enough to match entire fleets. Built not for conquest, but for defense, these ships had rested in silence for years. Now their engines awoke, their cores glowing like suns. On the dreadnought Iron Will, Captain Darren walked the command bridge as the crew prepared for departure. Screens lit up with systems coming online. Weapons hummed with energy, shields flickered as they powered up, and the deep thrumming of the engines shook the air. The crew moved with calm precision, each person knowing what was at stake. "They say the Vorn have never lost," one young officer whispered to another. "Then we will be the first to teach them loss," came the steady reply. Humanity's fleets gathered at the rally points. Dozens of dreadnoughts, supported by cruisers and carriers, lined up in space like mountains of steel. Their formation stretched across the stars, their hulls glowing with readiness. From afar, they looked like a storm preparing to break. News of this movement spread quickly. Traders carried the word to distant stations. The Alari message had not gone unheard. Humanity was not only sending ships, they were sending their strongest. Other races who had chosen silence now watched with wide eyes. Some whispered that the humans were reckless, that they would be destroyed. Others felt a strange stir of hope, seeing a power that did not bow before fear. Back in the colony under Vorn rule, secret messages reached Elder Marin. He gathered his people in the shadows of the council hall and told them what he had learned. "The humans have heard us," he said. "They have sent their dreadnoughts." The Alari gasped in disbelief. Some wept with relief. Others could not imagine it to be true. "Do not let hope blind you," one elder warned. "The Vorn are strong. The humans may fall as we have fallen." But Elder Marin shook his head. "Perhaps. But they come when no one else would. That alone makes them different. Let us hold on, for the storms are rising." Meanwhile, the human fleets continued to advance. At each jump through faster than light space, the tension grew sharper. Yet there was no fear in the hearts of the crews. Instead, there was purpose. Every man and woman aboard the ships knew they were not fighting for conquest or gain. They were fighting so that innocent people, far from Earth, would not vanish into silence. On the Iron Will, Captain Darren stood before his crew. His words were plain, but they carried weight. The Vorn believe fear rules the galaxy. They believe peace is weakness. They are wrong. We go not for ourselves, but for the Alari, who have no defense. Remember this when battle comes. Remember that we are the shield. His crew answered with steady voices. We are the shield. With that, the Dreadnoughts made their final jump. Space folded, light bent, and the storm of humanity raced toward the colony. Engines roared like thunder, weapons waited like lightning. The Alari had sent a call into the void, a fragile hope cast into darkness. Now, that call had been answered. The humans were coming, and with them came the promise of resistance. The Vorn did not yet know it, but their reign of fear was about to be challenged by storms of wrath. The Vorn believed themselves safe. In their view, no power in the galaxy dared to challenge them. On the Alari colony, they moved without care, patrolling the streets and taking whatever they pleased. Their commanders laughed at the weakness of the Alari, speaking of how soon the colony would be turned into a permanent outpost of their empire. To them, the distress call sent by the Alari was meaningless. No one would dare respond. But in the dark skies above, the first signs of change began to appear. On the fourth day of the occupation, the Vorn fleet orbited the planet in lazy formation. Their ships were dark and heavy, armed with weapons that had crushed many worlds. Their crews were confident, almost careless, certain no threat would appear. Then their sensors lit up. At first, the readings were faint, just small distortions in the fabric of space. The Vorn officers studied them with curiosity. Another colony ship, one muttered. A group of refugees. But then the distortions grew larger, brighter, stronger. One after another, massive signatures broke into their scanners. The Vorn captain's smile faded. His hands tightened on the console. These were not refugees. These were warships. And then, space itself seemed to split open. In a burst of light and thunder, the human dreadnoughts arrived. They came in formation, their hulls gleaming with steel and light. Their engines roared like storms, shaking the void. Each ship was a giant, dwarfing the Vorn cruisers. Dozens of them stretched across the sky, their weapons glowing with readiness. The Alari people, watching from the ground, looked up in awe as streaks of light burned across the heavens. For a moment, they thought the Vorn were unleashing new fire upon them. But then the shapes became clear, and hope filled their hearts. These were not Vorn ships. These were the ships of humanity. The human fleet spread into position with perfect discipline. Their dreadnoughts moved like walls of iron, each one shielding the others, each one a fortress of its own. Communication signals filled the air as human voices carried a message across the system. To the Vorn fleet, the human admiral's voice declared, steady and calm. You have attacked a peaceful people. You have one chance to withdraw and leave this world. If you do not, you will face the full strength of humanity. The words echoed across the channels. The Alari wept with relief at hearing them. For the first time since the invasion, they knew they were not alone. The Vorn commanders responded with laughter. You dare to threaten us? You are a young race. You do not understand the power you face. Leave now, before we crush you as we crushed them. But the humans did not leave. Their ships held steady, their guns trained on the enemy. Silence filled the void for a heartbeat, heavy and tense. Then the Vorn opened fire. Streams of energy leapt from their cruisers, striking at the human fleet. Explosions of light filled the sky as weapons clashed. But when the glow faded, the human shield still stood strong. The dreadnoughts had barely been touched. Return fire, Admiral Ryan ordered. The storm began. From the dreadnoughts came waves of power. Rail cannons thundered, hurling projectiles at impossible speeds. Plasma batteries lit up like suns, burning across the darkness. The first line of Vorn cruisers shattered under the assault, their hulls breaking apart, their engines bursting into flame. The Alari on the ground gasped as they saw pieces of Vorn ships fall through the sky like broken meteors. Hope surged through them, stronger than ever before. But the Vorn did not retreat easily. More of their ships rushed forward, trying to surround the humans. They unleashed everything they had, pouring fire into the Dreadnoughts. Yet the human formation held. Their ships moved as one, covering each other, striking with perfect coordination. Where the Vorn were wild and reckless, the humans were calm and precise. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Captain Darren stood firm as his ship delivered another barrage. His crew worked without panic, every hand steady. "Target the lead destroyer," he ordered. A moment later, the enemy vessel burst apart in flame. All across the battlefield, the same story repeated. Human dreadnoughts cut through the Vorn ranks like storms tearing through fragile branches. The once proud invaders found themselves overwhelmed. Down below, Elder Marin stood among his people, tears in his eyes. He pointed to the sky where human ships blazed with power. "Look," he whispered, "the storms have come. The humans have answered." For the first time since the invasion, the Alari people cheered. Their voices rose in song, echoing through the streets, even as the battle raged above. The Vorn, who had believed themselves unchallenged, now faced a reality they had never imagined. They were not invincible. They were not untouchable. Against the wrath of humanity, their power began to break. And the storm had only just begun. The battle in the skies above the Alari colony became a storm of fire and light. The Vorn, who once believed themselves unchallenged, now faced the full fury of humanity. Their cruisers and destroyers pressed forward in desperate waves, but every advance was met with walls of human firepower. From the bridge of the Iron Will, Captain Darren watched calmly as his crew carried out their duties. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "Do not break the line." The dreadnoughts moved with perfect precision. They were not scattered ships fighting on their own. They were a single shield, a single sword, striking in unity. When one ship came under heavy fire, two others shifted position to cover it. When an enemy cruiser broke through the front, the rear ships turned their guns as one, cutting it down before it could strike. The Vorn had never faced an enemy like this. They were used to fear. They were used to panic. But the humans did not panic. They did not retreat. Every blast of enemy fire was answered with a strike 10 times stronger. Rail cannons roared, sending projectiles faster than thought. Plasma weapons burned with heat that split Vorn shields apart. Missiles streaked across the void, each one guided with precision, each one finding its target. The dark sky became filled with light as Vorn vessels broke apart under the storm. On the ground, the Alari people gathered outside their homes, their eyes fixed on the heavens. They saw the stars blazing with explosions, the once terrifying Vorn ships falling one by one. Children pointed and cheered as fiery trails marked the fall of enemy vessels. For the first time since the invasion began, the Alari dared to believe that survival was possible. Inside the Vorn flagship, panic began to spread. The commander shouted orders, demanding his crews press the attack. But his officers hesitated. For the first time, doubt crept into their hearts. They had always believed the Vorn were the strongest, but now they saw their mighty fleet breaking like glass before the storm of humanity. Still, the Vorn fought fiercely. They were not cowards. They launched waves of smaller attack craft, hoping to swarm the human ships. Swarms of fighters filled the void, darting between dreadnoughts like insects. But the humans had prepared for this. Carriers released their own squadrons, sleek human fighters with unmatched speed. The two swarms clashed in the open sky, twisting and turning in a deadly dance. The human pilots fought with steady nerves, their training sharp, their courage unbroken. One by one, the Vorn fighters were cut down. On the Iron Will, alarms flared as 3 Vorn cruisers tried to break through the human formation. "Target them," Captain Darren ordered. The crew responded instantly. A barrage of cannon fire lit up the void, smashing the first cruiser apart. Plasma beams tore into the second, its hull glowing before it cracked in two. The third tried to flee, but a missile caught it in its engines, sending it spinning into darkness. The battle raged for hours, but the pattern never changed. The humans did not waver. They did not break. Their wrath was steady, controlled, and unstoppable. The Vorn fleet grew smaller with each passing minute. What had begun as confident arrogance now became desperate survival. Back on the colony, Elder Marin stood among his people, his eyes never leaving the sky. They fight not for conquest, he said softly, but for us. They fight so we may live. His words spread through the crowd, filling the Alari with pride and gratitude. They raised their voices in song, their melodies drifting into the night, carrying thanks to the humans above who could not hear them. By the end of the battle, the Vorn fleet was broken. Wreckage floated across the system, glowing with the fires of destruction. The surviving Vorn ships turned and fled, their once fearless commanders now desperate to escape. Humanity did not chase them. Admiral Ryan gave the order to hold position. The battle was won. The message was clear. Silence returned to the skies, broken only by the hum of human engines. The Alari colony, scarred but alive, looked upward in awe. Their call for help had been answered with storms of wrath, and the storms had brought salvation. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Captain Darren let out a quiet breath. "It is done," he said. His crew nodded, their faces proud yet calm. They knew this was not the end of the struggle against the Vorn, but it was the beginning of something greater. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they would not turn away from the cries of the innocent. Above the Alari world, the human dreadnoughts drifted in silent formation. Their guns still glowed from battle, their hulls marked with the scars of fire. Yet they stood unbroken. And their very presence promised the Alari and the galaxy beyond that a new force had risen, one that would not bow to fear. The wrath of humanity had spoken, and the galaxy would never forget it. The battle had ended, but the sky above the Alari colony was still heavy with smoke and floating debris. The Vorn had fled, their fleet broken and shattered. The Alari people slowly emerged from hiding, stepping over scorched fields and ruined buildings. Their homes had been damaged, their crops destroyed, but they were alive. And more than that, they were free from fear. Elder Marin walked among his people, his heart heavy with grief for what was lost, but filled with gratitude for what remained. Families hugged each other tightly. Children laughed nervously, pointing to the sky where the human dreadnoughts still hovered in silent formation, their engines humming softly. Then, one by one, the humans began to land. Their ships' landing bays opened with precision, and armored vehicles rolled out, carrying supplies, tools, and engineers. Human soldiers moved among the Alari without weapons drawn, offering help instead of threat. They repaired walls, rebuilt homes, and delivered food to those who had gone hungry for days. The Alari people watched in awe. These were not conquerors. They were not invaders. They were strangers who had come across the galaxy to protect them, and now they worked to restore what had been destroyed. Elder Marin approached the humans cautiously, but his voice was warm with relief. "Why do you help us?" he asked one of the human officers. The officer smiled simply. "Because no one should face darkness alone. Your world asked for help, and we answered. That is enough reason." The Alari were quiet for a moment, taking in the words. They had heard stories of humans, but now they saw the truth. Humans did not fight for glory or reward. They fought because it was right. They acted because they could. And their actions had saved a people who had almost been lost. Over the next several days, the humans worked tirelessly. Engineers cleared debris and rebuilt water systems. Soldiers helped transport supplies to villages that had been cut off. Even the children watched with fascination as human ships lifted massive pieces of metal to repair walls and buildings. The Alari began to see not only the strength of humanity but also their kindness. Elder Marin called a meeting of the colony leaders. "We have been given more than life," he said. "We have been given hope. These humans are not like any others in the galaxy. Their power is great, but greater still is their will to protect those who cannot defend themselves." His words spread quickly among the people. Hope, once fragile and nearly extinguished, now burned brightly. The Alari began to dream again. Fields would be replanted. Homes would be rebuilt. Children would grow without fear of the Vorn. Meanwhile, the human commanders sent communications across the surrounding systems. They warned other colonies and traders of the Vorn's retreat. They made it clear that humanity would act if any peaceful people were attacked. The message spread quickly, carried by fast ships and radio channels. The galaxy began to whisper a new understanding. Humans were no longer distant and uncertain. They were a power to be respected, a force that would protect the innocent. Some races, who had once ignored the Alari distress call, now looked upon humanity with caution and curiosity. They realized that stories were true. Humans did not wait for permission or favor. They acted. And where humans went, even the strongest of enemies might be stopped. Back on the colony, Elder Marin and his council worked with the human engineers. They learned how to repair their defenses and how to prepare in case of future attacks. The humans taught them lessons in strategy and protection, not to make them warriors, but to give them the knowledge to survive if danger returned. For the Alari, this was a new beginning. Their colony had been scarred, but it was alive. Their people had witnessed a power unlike any before, and they understood that even in the darkest times, help could come from beyond the stars. They began to build trust with humanity, forming a bond that would last for generations. The human fleet, after days of careful assistance, prepared to depart. Admiral Ryan addressed the Alari one last time. "Your people are strong, and your courage has carried you through. Remember what you have seen here. Stand together, protect each other, and never forget that there are those who will answer a call for help, no matter the distance." As the human ships lifted off, engines glowing in the morning light, the Alari waved, their hearts full of gratitude. The colony was not only saved, it was transformed. They had learned that the galaxy was vast, but not uncaring. Humanity had shown them that hope was real, and that even in the darkest storms, a helping hand could appear. And so, the Alari began to rebuild. Their villages grew brighter, their fields greener. Traders returned to the markets, children played without fear, and songs of gratitude filled the streets. The story of the humans' arrival, their strength, and their kindness spread to neighboring worlds. The legend of the human dreadnoughts was no longer a rumor. It had become truth. The galaxy began to remember the lesson: when a call for aid is sent, and all others turn away, humanity answers. Years passed since the human dreadnoughts had arrived above the Alari colony. The memory of that storm of fire and light remained vivid in the minds of the Alari. Children who had been small at the time now grew tall, their laughter echoing across fields that were once burned. The colony had been rebuilt stronger and brighter. Homes stood sturdy, water flowed clear in the rivers, and the fields were full of crops. The scars of war were gone, replaced with the promise of life. Elder Marin, now older, walked among his people. He watched as young Alari practiced skills they had learned from the humans: how to build structures quickly, how to maintain defenses, how to prepare for danger without fear. "They did not only save us," he said to a council meeting. "They taught us to protect ourselves. Humanity showed us that strength is not only in weapons, but in courage and wisdom." The story of the humans had spread far beyond the colony. Traders carried tales of their arrival, the battle in the skies, and the calm, disciplined wrath of the dreadnoughts. Neighboring worlds whispered of the humans who answered calls for help across the galaxy. Some who had once feared them now admired them. Some who had ignored others' pleas now reconsidered their own choices. The Vorn, who had been defeated, retreated deep into their own space. They rebuilt what they could, but they never forgot the humans who had struck fear into their ranks. Their confidence had been broken, their arrogance humbled. Across the galaxy, they became more cautious, learning that even the most powerful might be challenged when the weak were protected by the strong. In the years that followed, humanity did not occupy the Alari world. They left the people to rebuild, to grow, and to govern themselves. But they remained watchful. Scouts and communication stations were established at the edges of the system, not to control, but to guard. Humanity had shown that it acted for justice, not for conquest. The Alari learned that strength could be a shield, not a weapon to dominate others. Trade with neighboring species increased. Other colonies sent delegations to the Alari world, curious about the humans and inspired by the story of the Dreadnoughts. Peaceful agreements were formed, and the Alari began to play a greater role in regional discussions. Their survival and recovery became a symbol of hope for many who had lost faith in the galaxy. Elder Marin often spoke to the young people of the colony. "Remember the storm," he would say. "Not the fire, not the fear, but the courage that answered it. Humans came when no one else would. That is the lesson you must carry. Protect others when you can. Stand strong when the weak call for help. That is the true strength of any people." The humans themselves continued their quiet watch in the galaxy. Their fleets moved silently from system to system, responding only when needed. Their legend grew not because of conquest or fear, but because of their willingness to act when others would not. Across the stars, beings of many species learned that humanity's wrath was terrible when called, but even more important was humanity's willingness to protect the innocent. In the Alari colony, celebrations were held each year to remember the day the humans arrived. Songs were sung, not of battle alone, but of hope, courage, and survival. Children dressed in bright colors, and stories were told of the dreadnoughts that had blazed across the sky like living storms. These stories were not just about power, but about the values that had saved them: honor, courage, and compassion. Even the Alari elders who had doubted the humans' arrival now shared the tale with pride. They spoke of how a call for help, sent in desperation, had traveled across the stars and been answered by strangers who had no obligation, no promise of reward, only the will to do what was right. That message inspired generations to come. The galaxy remembered. Across distant worlds, whispers of humanity's deeds encouraged those who faced oppression or fear. The Alari colony became a symbol of resilience, proof that even the smallest people could survive when others stood for them. And humanity became a living legend, not as conquerors, but as protectors, storming into darkness to shield those in need. As Elder Marin looked at the stars each night, he smiled. He knew that one day, if the Alari ever faced danger again, they might stand alone, but they would do so with courage learned from the humans. And somewhere beyond the void, humanity would be there, ready to answer another call. The storms of wrath had passed, but their legacy remained. Peace had been restored, hope had been renewed, and a lesson for the galaxy had been written across the stars: when a call for aid goes out, and all others turn away, humanity responds. Not for power, not for reward, but for the survival of the innocent and the defense of what is right.